I'm Mike Costello, and I'm here today with Dr. Iris Freelander. And today we'd like to talk about the intuitive heart. And all of us have a certain level of intuition, and some of us act upon it and some of us don't. Others believe that we're more intuitive than others, but in truth, intuition is a natural part and part of the process of life, isn't it, Iris?
Yes, it is, and we often sell ourselves short thinking we can't be intuitive, and we wouldn't trust that. Well, if we would just practice it, we could learn to trust it. I remember when I was quite young, I read the way to develop your intuition was to, when you receive mail, don't look to see who it's from, but guess who it's from. Or not guess, hold it in your hands and sense who it's from. And then if the doorbell rings, decide who's there before you answer the door. And those were two ways where you could truly develop your intuition. And I think they worked. And I think that everyone who has a system and works on it, and it wouldn't matter what system they use, as long as it helps them be more intuitive, then their intuition becomes more better, doesn't it?
It does, and the idea of connecting intuition to the heart is, I think, taking things less intellectually. So sometimes we try, and certainly there's no problem at all with developing intuition, and we can all develop our intuitive skills, but we have a natural and innate intuition, and it's really through the connection with our heart, and we know that as we feel who and what we are, because we tend to really see the more positive things. If we really let our intuition respond appropriately, we can become intuitive to other people. And that's not to say that we need to worry about being intuitive to them from the standpoint of knowing why they're doing anything, or anything that anything very complex, but to simply know intuitively through the connection of the action and the dynamic of our heart. The other thing I was just thinking when I was talking about heart, we think about our heart as an emotion, and it certainly is, but our bodies, we can be intuitive to the needs of our physical bodies, can't we, in terms of what we need in terms of nutrients and exercise and rest.
Yes, we can. I've mentioned a healer to you, Gene Egidio, and he has a book, and in one chapter of his book, he was telling about how one man found a blood vessel broken in his head, and so the man was bleeding and becoming weaker and weaker, and the doctors couldn't find out what was the matter with him. So Gene Egidio had him start with his feet, and those listening to us might want to try this because it works. He had him start with his feet and see and just sense, is anything wrong with your feet? Do you see anything amiss there? And he didn't. So he just went right up, first one leg and then the other, through his torso, through his shoulders. And so then he got all the way to the head, to the brain. And he said, do you see something in your head amiss? And he said, yes, I see blood spurting from a vein that's broken. And it was a rather small vein, but it was broken, and the blood was spurting out. And it had been going on like that for a day or so. So I thought that was quite remarkable that the healer didn't find out where that was, but he guided the patient into finding out where it was.
Mm-hmm. And that's a great example of identifying an ailment or a physical weakness or need within our bodies. From a nutritional standpoint, I'm just thinking too, sometimes we think we have a hunger for this or that, when in fact our bodies need that particular nutrient. You're a great lover of chocolate, aren't you? So chocolate, maybe there are intuitive times when that need is present within you, and of course sometimes it's just to satisfy the desire, and there's nothing wrong with that. But our bodies tell us so often, and as we talk to people, often people will talk about a craving, maybe a craving for milk products. Well, and then often we'll find that there's a calcium deficiency, and by taking in more calcium, people can feel better. And I think a great example of using our intuition from a health standpoint is to really allow our bodies to speak to us. And if we're tired when we really shouldn't be tired, then there may very well be something going on. Now, it could be emotional, but it could be physical as well.
Yes, and I have used that system a great deal with my own body, and I'll bet you have too, because there was a chiropractor I went to 27 years ago, Dr. Michael Ramsden, did kinesiology, and to me it's the same idea, except he defined it so that he would know what was happening there. But it's really easy to do, and we can define it. And at one time, I had tests, and they thought I might have cancer internally. And I checked my whole body out, and particularly all that area where there was a suspicion. And they thought it was really pretty definite. And then it didn't seem so. So I asked to have the test redone, and sure enough, there was not a problem. So I think that we can all do that, and we should. And even if it doesn't, if we don't find the answer that we're seeking or the one we want, at least it's a good exercise to do. And that's true too. When we talk with spiritual teachers or guides and teachers, we should form our own answer when we ask questions of a spiritual nature or of any other thing, I suppose. Only I've just done it with spiritually oriented questions. And so I form my own answer before asking, just to test to test myself. And I think that's a very good exercise, don't you?
Absolutely, absolutely. And just from a business standpoint, I think that over and over again we find that those executives that operate from a high sense of intuitive awareness are very productive. And we can have all kinds of data and information, much like on the physical level, your doctors and the test may have given you certain information in business. And a fair amount of my time is spent in business, more than I'd like sometimes. But sometimes the numbers and the financial statements and the information and the plans that are laid, they may tell us one thing, but if we really respond intuitively, then we are operating from, as we say so often, our higher self, and we're connected with something that is divine and something that has limitless intelligence. And it isn't even necessary to make it, to verbalize it as such, but we do operate at that level. And I think those in business, especially those who are successful in business and at very high levels in business, have, through studies, identified the fact that intuition and operating from their own intuitive level, even when the data show something different, are more successful.
Yes, and that makes sense. And it starts, I think, in childhood. I see the babies, everyone talks about the babies coming in now being more advanced, and they're given names of indigo children and various other names, rainbow children, but they are more, and they're very intuitive. I've seen that with the children. But I think that other children might have been equally intuitive and people didn't even notice. And I know that it seems that children are highly intuitive and have ESP until about the age of 6. And who knows, that's when they used to go out into the world. Now they go to preschool much younger than that. But it used to be they'd go to kindergarten at age 6. But when anyone uses their intuition, and we know that they do, we need to honor that, and particularly with the children, and not put them down, because then they lose heart and they don't do it as much. But I've seen children recognize, I've seen one child who would know when his parents were in the house, when they hadn't made a sound, but just their presence was definitely in the house. And so that's a very wonderful factor. But I'm just wondering if in prior years, let's say 2 generations ago, if the intuitive level was as high in the human beings, in the babies, as it is today, that would be an interesting thing if we could find out.
Probably, like all things, the intuitive abilities from a cognitive standpoint are certainly evolving, and through the generational process are moving. But it really, I think, at its core has to do with how in touch we are, or how in touch people are with their own creativity. And I think creativity is another way of saying it. And I think children are certainly intuitive. I think artistic people tend to be creative. Hopefully educators tend to be creative and intuitive. And hopefully we're intuitive too to see beyond, and in our way of thinking and new thought, we talk a lot about seeing beyond the appearances to the reality of that which really is true. And sometimes on the surface, what we see is chaos or confusion or turmoil or difficulty. But in fact, if we are able to see clearly, and I think even from a scriptural standpoint, Paul talked about seeing in a mirror dimly. And I think as you said so well, children come in with this ability to connect with the divine and to connect with this intuitive ability with such ease because they're not told that it's not there. And then we convince them and we convince ourselves that it's not there, but it never really leaves us. And we become less and less intuitive as we become more grounded in the physical aspects of life, and we begin to deny the intuitive feelings that we have. But I think from a primal standpoint, we have intuition when we know that danger is around. Many people have that sense even before it happens, or impending doom. And of course, there are other reasons for that as well. But it is a wonderful gift to have an intuitive heart and to have an intuitive mind, but even more than having an intuitive mind, having an intuitive heart. Because when I think about intuitive minds, I think about people who are so pridefully intuitive, and they're able to develop that ability of having strong intuition, and then they want to share that with everyone as though it's an accomplishment. But it really is a natural process and a natural gift and talent and a grace that's given to all of us.
Yes, but I think some people are more intuitive than others, and I believe you just said that. But that's nothing is more disgusting than to hear people show off. It's one way to say it, and unfortunately, people do. When you were talking about just a moment ago, when you were speaking, I remembered when I was opening the drapes in my bedroom one morning this week. Well, I sensed there was something at my feet. And I don't know why I sensed that, because I couldn't look down because I was looking up, pulling the drapes. But I sensed it, and it was a lizard, a little lizard. It was about 8 inches long, probably. And I thought, well, how did you get in here? But instead of shrieking and jumping up on the desk, I opened the door. And I opened the closet door to find what I could scoot it out with, and there was something that I'd put there that I didn't even remember putting there to clean the windows, and so I used that to put here and then just scooted it out the door, and it went out the door. But that's one time my intuition helped me, and then I wasn't scared to death by stepping on it or having it get on my body or something. But we do develop our intuition, and it can come to good use. I was thinking, too, that there's a law, an unwritten natural law, that we're not to violate other people's privacy. And I do think there's like an electric wall around people, and that's not a very good way to say it. It's not a very erudite way to say it, but it's the best I can do. That protects every person from another person's prying eyes. So we shouldn't even try, just like we wouldn't open someone else's mail or read mail that's been opened that we're not invited to read. Well, then we wouldn't interfere with another person's aura and go into their aura. But I think we would be deflected, and when we are having when we're looking for information, if we're violating the other person's privacy, we wouldn't be able to get it. What do you think about that?
I think that's absolutely true, and I think we need to have that level of sensitivity, especially from the prying and the kind of inane activities that you were talking about. We need to be very protective of that, I think. We'd like to pause at this point of the program and offer you some information that we hope will be useful.
like to offer you the opportunity to receive one of these free booklets to further your understanding of the New Thought message of confident living. Each month we will feature a different booklet, which will be mailed to you free and postage paid. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California, 90807.
Just before the break, we were talking about the fact that we can be intrusive with our intuition, and I think that is something that we need to really be sensitive about, and we need to honor the privacy of other people and also keep our own space, if you will, too. It's important to us, to our personal integrity, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I think that, as I was saying earlier, I think that we wouldn't even be able to invade another person's privacy, but just if we tried, then it would be a karmic glitch for us that we'd have to correct somewhere along the line, because that goes against God's laws. It's not our laws, it's God's laws. And so he gave every person free will, and he gave every person that ability to shield themselves and to be shielded, to just absolutely be shielded. And of course we all have a guardian angel, and that angelic being would come into play in protecting us and guarding us. But the point being, don't invade anyone else's privacy when you're trying to exercise your intuition. But to exercise our intuition, to me, I think is very essential to deliberately do it. And we might talk about ways that people could go about it. I mentioned earlier about that I learned when I was very young to check the mail and see who. So there's things that we can do like that, but we talk all the time, often about meditation. So in meditation, when we're asking questions and receiving answers, that's a form of intuition, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it's a form of intuition. It's a form of developing the intuitive heart, and it is also a wonderful mechanism for allowing our own intuitive nature to be rekindled. And I think it's important to remember that we are talking about the development of a talent or a skill or a grace or a gift, but excuse me, even more than that, we're talking about the reconnecting with something that has always been. And in the beginning of the program, you shared with us about children, and very true that children tend to be very intuitive and very connected to each other and to the divine. And we, as we mature, we really become more immature. And so meditation, I think, allows us to go back into ourselves and to ask, not only to ask questions and get answers, which is certainly a fundamental part of it, but it is a tremendously powerful tool for developing our intuitive abilities.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And as you know, I'm leading the church outreach meditation spiritual development group now through Lent. And I can see that in the people who attend those meetings, those who really want to and relax, and they have to learn to relax and just let the information flow. And by attending meetings regularly, whether it would be our meetings or someone else's meetings, it's a very wonderful way of developing intuition, because as they sit there quietly with not any problem in a safe place, then they can just let themselves be totally open to the input of the divine or the information that they're seeking. And I see it, I've been doing that now for many years, and I see it very clearly that it's all those different factors that make the difference. If we feel safe, and if we are not working too hard at it, but just letting it flow. So that would be some of the things that our listeners might want to do, and to just sit quietly and ask questions and to hear the answers come. And we have to be intuitive to have those answers come. And at the Edgar Cayce Foundation in Virginia Beach, they discovered that just 30 seconds of meditation changed the vibratory rate of the person, changed their endorphin level. It was measurable. And it comes from the pineal pituitary gland where they meet in the brain. And they also discovered that the pituitary and pineal gland are like a mortar and pestle. And when one is meditating, those go together. And then when they're not meditating, they would do, the pineal gland would retract back so that they were not coming together. And I think that's very fascinating because it shows that physically, you can see it physically, that although it is, you can see it physically in a photograph, that it really works that way. And so we know that our bodies change. And then when they once change and the energy steps up, then it stays stepped up that much. And then as we do that exercise more and more, then the energy stays stepped up more. So it's just it's a progressive thing, and yet it's residual. Mm-hmm. And the talent is residual.
An important topic, I think, as we move into the last part of the program and the end of the program, is that by developing an intuitive heart, we can actually gain more energy, can't we?
Yes.
Not only can we gain more knowledge and gain more insight and gain more connection with the world around us and with the presence and power of God and the angelic realm and the higher self, but we can have more vitality, and we can have more strength, and we can actually be more energetic. And I think there isn't a single one of us, regardless of what our age is, that doesn't need more energy.
Exactly.
And that energy is never depleted. That's another aspect. And I think, as we've talked in this program, there are certain kinds of energy that we have that energies that are depleted. But I think the intuitive energies actually increase, don't they? And they just continue to grow and grow and grow.
Yes, it's very much like a muscle, I suppose, that as you develop that muscle and use it, it expands. And so at any event, you're right, it stays there, and it's residual, and it stays. And we can use it ever more fully. And it makes our lives more rewarding, too, and easier if we use our intuition. And very often, there's so many ways that it can be used. Everyone can use their imagination to see the many ways that if we do develop that intuitive capacity. And again, in relation to meditation, we're seeing and speaking with those on the inner planes of being, which is so very rewarding. It's immeasurably rewarding. And so we have that extra added bonus of being able to see and speak with them. And sometimes people just speak with them and don't see them, and that's very rewarding as well. So there's so many different bonuses, aren't there?
Absolutely, and this connection of the mind, body, spirit, which we spend a lot of time talking about, is so important to link those three together and to have them not be dependent upon each other, but although they are, but to empower and strengthen each of those three parts of our being strengthens us as the persons and as the beings and as the minds that we are. And we are indeed wonderfully and wonderfully made, aren't we?
Who has it said, fearfully and wonderfully made? And certainly. And everyone is. And that's another thing. We can give people the honor of knowing that each person has those wonderful qualities that we so admire. And sometimes they're hidden, and sometimes people deliberately hide them because they're very modest, or they think it's their imagination. But when we live fully and highly, then it shows in our demeanor, and it shows in our skin. It shows we have a glow, and we can see that in people. And the energy body, as we develop spiritually in mind, body, and spirit, then that rosy glow is around the physical body. And then if persons are not healthy and strong, then it looks dark. And it's like, if you see it clairvoyantly, it's like you're seeing droplets of energy. And then when someone is not healthy, it looks gray. And those little droplets are drooping. It's very interesting to see. And then when they are healthy and strong, then it's as if they're standing upright, and then they look rosy. So there's a lot of different ways we can understand how people are doing.
It really has to do with empowerment, doesn't it?
Yes.
And strengthening and and all of the things that we want in ourselves and in others, and ways in which we can have a more abundant and magnificent life. And I think all of our viewers can deal with, in their own experience, with the difference between being feeling good and feeling not so good, feeling tired or feeling invigorated, and feeling empowered or feeling beaten. And so this intuitive heart and the connection of the intuition to the heart and the mind and the body and all, and allowing that to permeate every atom of our being, and not even going beyond the atoms of our being, to the energy, to the reality of our spiritual reality and being, is such a liberating and magnificent thing. And we talk so often on this program about the fact that we talk about universal principles. We're not talking about people changing their churches or changing their faith tradition, although we welcome anybody to come and join with us that would like to. We'd be delighted to have them do that. But it's this principle of having the intuitive heart can be practiced whoever we are and wherever we are, without a change of faith or even a change of place. But it does require a change of mind and a change of heart.
Yes, and total acceptance that this is real and is possible, because we have to know that with God all things are possible, and we have to really believe that, and believe that we are capable of doing whatever it is we set out to do, and because we're capable of so much more than we ever dream we are, and the more intuitive we are, then the more we accept that fact that there's more to life than meets the eye, and that as we work for coordination in mind, body, and spirit, then we are able to do just that. And it makes life far more rich and wonderfully rewarding. And also we're able to help other people, because we can just intuitively feel what their problems are. We can, when they come to us for help, for healing or counseling, then we intuitively feel what's happening within them, and we're able then to be more effective. But that's true whether we're talking with people as a friend or in business. It's just in all walks of life, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it calls us to have open minds and open hearts and open arms, and to welcome these universal truths and principles that we've been sharing with you. And we hope that the ideas and concepts that we've been talking about are useful, and we look forward to seeing you next time.